Hello, I'm Terry Gilliam, and we're about to do my entire career in 40 minutes, seconds, hours. Wait for it.
For me, Jabberwocky, the opening shot of that movie, sort of summarises a lot of what I love about your work, because it's the butterfly sort of flying, landing on the plant, and then a big boot coming down and crushing it. And it's got that sort of clash of beauty and reality,
Yeah.
And it's got the subversion of expectations, and it's also just really funny.
Yeah.
What sort of themes were you hoping to explore in your career? Were you thinking sort of at that level, or was it just going from film to film at that point?
It's really film to film. I mean,
Right.
Jabberwocky intrigued me because I wanted to do a fairy tale. And I love the idea of it's basically a clashing fairy tale where the hero wins everything you're supposed to win in a fairy tale, but it's not what he wanted in life.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's saying something really interesting, and it's fun. And it was also, I was dealing with, the difference between a businessman and a craftsman, which Mike is really the businessman. He's interested in selling barrels, not making beautiful barrels. He'd do it cheaper if it made him more money. So those things were there, and I always loved castles and Grimm's fairy tales and monsters, and here was a chance to do it.
So where did the idea for Time Bandits come from?
I mean, Time Bandits was a result of my inability to get Dennis O'Brien, our manager at that point, because we had just, after Life of Brian, created handmade films with George Harrison. And Dennis was George's manager, and he became Python's manager. And so, let's do films now. We've got a film company. We're going to make films. And I wanted to make Brazil at that point, but he just didn't respond to it. And I said, okay, I'll just make a film for all the family, for everybody. Everybody will love this one. And sat down on the weekend and basically wrote the structure and the idea of Time Bandits out, and then got Mike Palin to work with me, and I wrote the script, and he wrote those wonderful dialogue and characters, all the things that I'm weak at, Mike filled in. So it was a very good balance. And everybody got excited about it, and off we went. And this is where early days are always interesting, because on one hand, Mike is in it, John Cleese is in it, and I'm there. So there's half of Python is involved. But then Dennis did things like lure Sean Connery in. Dennis was quite literal, and Mike and I had written in the script that at the end of the fight with the Minotaur, the Greek warrior removes his helmet, revealing himself to be none other than Sean Connery, or an actor of equal but cheaper stature, is what we wrote in the script, is a joke. And Dennis, of course, took it literally, and he just turned, I don't know how he managed to be ending up playing golf with Sean Connery. Connery was at a point in his career where he wanted to try something different, and bingo, suddenly we've got Sean Connery.
The film has an incredibly dark ending in a way, from a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view.
Exactly, yeah. Did you have to fight for that?
At the time, I was told we can't do that ending. I mean, there's no way that ending is going to be allowed, because this is a family film, blah, blah, blah. And luckily, we had one of these national research group, whatever, NRG screenings in America, in Fresno, where you bring people from the shopping mall, and they get a free night out, and they can judge what America will get to watch. And the sound, something was wrong. It was terrible. It was either through the Dolby system or not. And so most of the dialogue, and the audience was pouring out. Now, one of the things I'd insisted on when you have to fill out these forms at the end of it, this quiz, they said, is the film too long, was one of the questions. I said, well, it has to be, is the film too short? You've got to have a choice there. You can't keep doing this. And one of the things is, which is your favorite bit of the movie, was one of the questions. And what happened, and this is the moment when I really love this moment, because all the cards are there. The statisticians are collating all this information, but haven't got it all finished yet. I asked if I could take the cards home with me back to the motel I was staying in. And you're going through them, and you're seeing people hating the movie because they couldn't understand it, they had left. And the question is, which was the best part of the film? Was the ending. It was over, they could go home. And that's what they put in. That was their answer, and it was scrawled. You could see the writing, scrawled, piece of shit, you know, like. But if you're a statistician, you just click off the numbers, and there it was. The favorite part of the movie was the ending.
Brilliant.
And that's how it ended.
And so on to Brazil. You had that in mind before Time Bandits, as you mentioned. How much did it change over the course of that time? How different is the film from the original conception?
The conception didn't change at all.
Right.
I mean, it's a bureaucracy. It's a bureaucracy, a ministry that is anti-terrorist, and if there aren't terrorists, you have to create it. How else are you going to keep your jobs? You know, it's a world of paranoia. It's about bureaucracy. It's all these things. That didn't change. I think the start and ending never altered. Because I started working with Chuck Alverson, who had written Jabberwocky with me. We're all mates from the States. And it got to a certain point, and it wasn't working, so I continued on my own and ended up with just under 100 pages of script. Somebody suggested Tom Stoppard, who, where I was, let's say, particularly good at visuals, he was particularly good at words. Let's put them together. And Tom and I got together, agreed to work, and Tom went away and really altered the structure in many ways. He made it work. Buttle, tuttle, confusion is Tom perfectly. It's so simple and elegant. The bug at the beginning that starts the process of things going wrong, Tom. So there's all this wonderful stuff that he did. It ended up, we started shooting it. Now what happened is that about 12 weeks into the shoot, it became clear that we were going to have a 5-hour film, and that we were going to go way over budget, and these were the things that were not allowed. So my producer was Arnon Milchan, who had just started in Hollywood a year or two before, and in the time we did during the Brazil course, he did Once Upon a Time in America, King of Comedy, Legend, and Brazil. That's not bad for a year and a bit. And Arnon was basically a pirate. He was Israeli. Recently, there's been a biography come out, and he's now revealed himself to be the spy for Israel. All these things. I mean, he was a much more interesting character than a spy. He was somehow involved in arms dealing, everything. Don't ask where the money comes from when you make a movie. It's all dirty when you get to a certain level of money. I don't care where it comes from. But Arnon I loved because he was like me, a bit of a buccaneer. After Time Bandits, which was a huge hit in America, huge. I was hot suddenly. I was A-list. So these scripts were coming, and I kept turning them down. And this one particular script they were really wanting to make, and clearly I had been raised up. Spielberg had probably said no, Lucas had said no. So, Gilliam, so now he's top of the list, and this is a #1 project, and I said I didn't want to make it, which somehow elevated the Brazil project up. As you say no to one, the other rises. And we went out to Cannes. We had a budget of 12 million. We still weren't getting many takers, and so we raised it to 15. And so it was like moving from Oxford Street down to Bond Street, a different clientele. And we managed to get 20th Century Fox to take it for the world and Universal to take it for America, and off we went. And then we cut the thing together, finished the effects, and it went out in Europe, no problem. Fox was no problem. And Universal in the States decided they had a real problem, and they weren't going to release the film. They wouldn't show the film in any way. We tried to get a PR company to help us. No, they completely embargoed the whole thing. And the way we broke the embargo ultimately is I was asked to go to USC Film School to give a talk. And I said, could I bring some audiovisual aids with me? It just happened to be all the film, but we wouldn't get to run the credit sequence at the end, so it wasn't the whole film, it's just part of the film. 99% of the film. And in there at USC Film School, and it became a nightmare because they wouldn't project it, because the dean of the students was worried about funding from the studios, because USC is funded by the studios.
Right.
My lawyer was on the phone to Universal's lawyer, whose name was Middleman, Mr. Middleman, which is you couldn't write this stuff, and Mr. Middleman said, okay, it's all right to show part of the film. And but the dean wouldn't open his door, and he wouldn't take the phone call. I had all these people in the room, the students and all, saying, "Go and beat on the dean's door." It says, "Take the call, take the call," and they did. He wouldn't do it, so it was never shown. But there were students from another film school further, Caltech it was called, and they said, "We'll show it." And so we ended up going out there and showing the film. And in the course of all of this, there were some people from the Los Angeles critics there in this Q&A, and they got intrigued, and we started a series of these clandestine screenings around their homes. And in the meantime, I had done something else to try to get things going, because I didn't know what to do, because I said to Arnon, the producer, "They've got all the lawyers in the world. We can't win on that front." So I took out an ad in Variety, which rather than streams of columns of how many $1 billion the film has made in the last hour, was this blank page with a black funereal border around it, and there, just white space, and there in the middle, written in small, intimate, personalized type, "Dear Sid Sheinberg, boss of Universal, when are you going to release my film Brazil? Signed, Terry Gilliam." And of course, the shit hit the fan. It was wonderful. You don't do that. Hollywood is all designed with lawyers and managers to do backroom dealings. But it went out there. The press loved it. Off we went. And I went as far as being on Good Morning America, which is the big ABC television national show, with De Niro. And that was one of the great things about De Niro, who never promoted his films. He agreed to do it because he knew if he was being interviewed, we'd get on a big show like that, and I would be his friend tagging along. And so Maria Shriver, who went on to be Mrs. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was her program, she was interviewing Bob, and Bob would say, "Yeah, no." And after a while, this interview is sort of grinding to a close. And she then turns to me and said, "I understand you have a problem with the studios." And I said, "I don't have a problem with the studio. Well, I've got a problem with one man, Sid Sheinberg, who runs the studio." And I then pulled out an 8x10 glossy of Sid and ran to the camera and held it there for all of millions of Americans to see. This is Sid Sheinberg. He's the guy. Because the idea of him hiding behind corporate responsibility made me crazy. I was not irresponsible. We had agreed to make this film. The script was there. It was exactly what we agreed. We delivered that. And then at the end of the day, they say, "But we want a different story. We want a different film. We want a happy ending." I said, "Not going to happen." And so that's how the fight went. And eventually the LA critics discovered that in their bylaws, the film didn't actually have to be released to be to qualify for the vote that year. And Universal is in New York at this point with Robert Redford, Meryl Streep. It was out of Africa, their big movie. They're all in their tuxes, their ties. This is a great moment. And the LA critics vote Best Picture, Best Screenplay, Best Director, Brazil. And they had to release the film at that point.
I love Barry Munchausen.
Thanks,
It's one of my favourite of your films. How did you get through making that movie? Because, I mean, you had people with the financiers were threatening to repossess your home. Your producer was threatening to burn the negatives. How did you get through that?
I was young. I was younger and foolish. I've always been foolish, but young and foolish is better. The whole process was like a nightmare, because here's how. I mean, we had $23.5 million from Columbia. David Putnam was running the studio at that point. He got fired just before we started shooting. So now we're kind of an orphan, but there's the budget. The producer, who was no longer Arnon, because Arnon did what Arnon always has to do, is somehow, well, basically has to fuck you, whether it's financially, physically, spiritually. It's his nature. It's not that he does it consciously. He's just like that. I still like him. But anyway, that's his nature. And so basically it happened. I won't go into how all this happened, but it did. And I ended up with the guy who was going to be the line producer, becoming the producer, a man named Thomas Schuley. And we had decided I wanted to shoot in Italy, in Cinecittà, which was a dream. I ended up with Dante Ferretti, who was Fellini's designer, and Gabriele Piscucci, people I really admired. So that's going on, very nice. However, with our 23.5 million, I had storyboarded the whole thing. It was all there. There was no secrets, no surprises. Thomas hired an accountant. He said it's going to cost 60 million. He gets the elbow. Hires another accountant. He says 45, gone. We're down to 30. The third one goes. The fourth one says, we can do it for $23.5 million. He stayed. And then we start. And of course, very soon, within 6 out of a 21-week shoot, by the 6th week, all the money seemed to be gone. Ooh, what's happening here? We were in Spain by this point. The bond company who ensure that the film will be finished closed us down. They just said, no, that's it. What it meant was, they went back to Rome. I kept saying, you're trying to blame me. I'm not the problem. They said, the sequence on the moon, it's going to have to be removed. The sequence of the moon used to have Sean Connery as the king of the moon, 2,000 people on the moon, all whose heads detached from their body and floated separately. It was a big, big sequence. It was my Cecil B. DeMille sequence. And they said, we got to cut that sequence out. I said, we're not going to cut the sequence out, you know. And so all I did was remove 3 zeros and ended up with 2 people on the moon. And all the big sets we were going to build, which we couldn't build, all I did was take the drawings of the sets. We blew them up, put them on plywood, cut them out, and so the moon is a series of flat moving things like my animation.
And so I think it's around this time that you mentored Quentin Tarantino at Sundance.
It must have, probably, you're right, it was. Because you go to the Sundance Institute, not the festival, and what they do, they always have some pros and then some amateurs, and you put them together, and it's a very good and interesting thing. Quentin happened to be there for 2 weeks. He was with one group of pros and then another group, which I was in the second group. The first group, he had this script for Reservoir Dogs, and Quentin, being Quentin, he's got all this energy and he's extraordinary. And the earlier group just didn't get him. They didn't like the script. They gave him a very hard time. And he was in a very depressed state when we came on. My group was myself, Volker Schlondorf, great German director who had directed Tin Drum, really wonderful film, and Stanley Donen, who had done Singing in the Rain, Funny Face, all the great musicals, the great romantic musicals of in particularly the 40s and 50s. So that was our little group. And we all read Quentin's script, and the other 2 didn't really quite get it, but I said, this is fantastic. This is extraordinary stuff. And we looked at, he had already shot a couple scenes, which luckily he reshot for the film. But there's a guy with this energy, this intelligence, this passion, and his ability to write, just extraordinary. I thought, he's extraordinary. And so we became good friends. I said, it's wonderful. And apparently he says that this made a huge difference to him. So, and which is great, because I ended up with a special thanks on Reservoir Dogs, so I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And have you followed his career? Have you watched
How
his
can you
movies?
not follow Quentin's career? Quentin is an unstoppable force. He's brilliant. I remember when he sent me the Django script, and I read it. It was a 5-hour movie. I mean, this is madness, but every page, I said, you bastard, you're so brilliant. I'm so envious of his abilities. And the fact that he managed to compress it down to a reasonable length movie is again quite extraordinary. Quentin is very special. What he does is take all the worlds that we know, all the movies we've seen, all the stuff we're very familiar with, and then he twists it around and turns it into something surprising all the time. And that's an incredible ability to play with, and he still makes it like a movie, but it's a different movie. I mean, I don't have those skills, so I think it's wonderful what he does. I mean, I can criticize his stuff. I can say Django should have ended when Christoph dies. That's the end of the movie. You want one big shootout after that, and you want to go home. But he stuck to the story he was trying to tell, which was a love story. He was just telling the wrong love story. The love story is between Django and Christoph's character. It's a buddy movie. Besides that, so it's easy to tear things apart. That's the thing that especially everybody does it now with their tweeting. They're tweeting before they finish the song, or even the movies halfway through it, and they'll be tweeting about what they think about it. Shut the fuck up and let it come to you. Stop being a commentator. There's enough commentators and critics in the world. Learn to experience the moment and get either good or bad scars from the moment, hopefully.
And so the Fisher King came next for you. How did you feel going into that after two such huge battles?
Yeah, I was shagged out. I was knackered. I sort of broke all my rules, basically, because before I was only going to do things that I had written. And so I just said, okay, here's this incredible script that came to me, and I thought, I know these people, there's no special effects in it. Well, there ended up being a couple. And it's about great characters, well written. It was Richard LaGravenè's script. It was the first thing he had written. And there were parts of the script I really didn't like because it seemed to be trying to turn this into a caper film where stealing the Grail on roller skates. What are these scenes about? And I got on to Richard and said, can you show me some of your earlier scripts? Show me, in fact, the first thing you had written before the studio and the producers tried to make it a saleable product. And we went back to his early stuff because it was all there. He's a brilliant writer. And I said, I understand these characters. I'm envious of your talent. Let's do it. And what really was happening was the studio wanted to make it, as did the producers, and they wanted Robin Williams in. I was, I guess, the bait to get Robin. It wasn't about Terry Gilliam as much as getting Robin. The only major thing that I changed in it was the sequence in Grand Central Station when they waltz and fall in love, because it was originally a very simple scene with a poor black lady singing, and Jeff's character was kind of moved and for a moment just took a breath. And we were at Grand Central checking it out. It was the rush hour, and more people were coming in. The speed was building up. It was like, it was getting like, and I said, wouldn't it be nice if in the midst of all this, they would pass another person, look, fall in love, and start dancing. And I said, yeah, but we're not going to do that. It's a Gilliam film. And the producers all said, we've got to do it. I said, come on, I'm not going to do this shit. And they convinced me, and it turned out well.
After Fisher King, which was a big success.
That was a big success. Now I'm back on the A-list again, yes.
And on that A-list, you were offered Watchmen by Joel Silver.
Yes.
Now, there was some detail came out last week in which Joel said that the ending would have changed, in which the characters are sucked into a comic book. Was that your idea? Was that Joel's idea? Where did that come from? Because I'd read that you always thought it would work better as a mini-series,
Yeah, of course.
which seemed like you'd want to be quite faithful to it. So I'm just interested.
I mean,
in
this is the problem at the time. I mean, Joel was really hot on Watchmen, and I love Watchmen. I mean, and so I got Charles McEwan back after Munchausen, and we started trying to work out how do you compress all of that into that. And that was always a problem, and we did, and I made some big leaps to try to do it, sacrificed certain characters almost to do it. And I was never completely convinced or happy with what we had done. I thought it would make it a good film. It would probably get hammered by the fans. But I mean, I talked to Alan Moore about it, and Alan basically said, I'd rather you fuck it up than me, which was a very reasonable and intelligent thing to say. So there it was, and in the end, we didn't get the money to make it. And I can't even remember what we did. So when I hear Zack Snyder saving the film from the Terry Gilliams of the world, I can't even remember what we had done. I just knew it would be better longer. And so, he made the film, and it looks great, and a lot of it is really good, but it suffers from the very thing that I was concerned about how do you compress it. And by the end of his version of it, I really was not happy with it, but I'd say 2/3 of the movie, I thought he had done a great job. So I'm not sure what it was that I was going to destroy the film so badly with. It doesn't matter. I think Joel I don't know why Joel even brought this whole thing up again. I don't know what's going on. In fact, I just put on my Facebook page, who are the Terry Gilliams of this world? How much power do they have? What is it they're up to destroy things? Because I just find the whole thing's very silly, and that's where the whole web, everybody's going crazy with this at the moment, and I'm not going to rise to it because I'm not looking for a fight on this one. I'll have fights on the things I want to have fights about.
And so, moving on, back to your actual movies, 12 Monkeys came next. How did you feel when you first read that script? Because it's an incredible script.
Yeah, I thought this is wonderful because they're not going to make it. This is not going to get through the studio system. This is too complex. It's too brilliant. It's wonderful. And Chuck Roven, and this is how the connections go. Chuck Roven, who produced it, was Mr. Don Steele. He was the wife of Don Steele during the Munchausen times. And there it was, and it was just brilliant. And that's all I'm interested in doing. I don't want to do what is easy. I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. There's enough people out there doing that, and they're technically better than I am. I don't want to know about that. I want to take the ideas, the stories that nobody wants to touch or doesn't know how to make in this instance. And after, I don't know, I can't remember how we started working on it. What happened was that all these names came up for the part that Bruce played, and I kept saying no, wrong. As usual, it's just whoever is hot that moment. Wrong. I originally wanted Jeff Bridges to play the part, but Jeff, I think as a result of The Mirror Has Two Faces, the Barbra Streisand film that Richard LaGravenese wrote, and which failed, unfortunately was now down. This is how evil that system is. The head of the studio says, no, Jeff Bridges is the jinx to movies. Jeff Bridges is one of the greatest actors America has produced. But that's the business, that's how it works. So all these other big names are coming. I said, no. And finally, and I walked away from the whole project. And then Bruce's name came up. And now I'd met him during the making of Fisher King, and he'd come on the set. And we talked a bit. And I said, one of the things I really loved about the first Die Hard was that scene where you're picking glass out of your feet, you're on the phone to your wife and you're weeping. And he said, that was my idea. And I thought, Bruce, you've got some good stuff hidden there. and so we met and we had a good dinner. I said, but here's the deal. I want Bruce Willis actor. I don't want Bruce Willis superstar in this movie. I'm not interested in that guy. I want you, and I want you to come naked, really, without your entourage. I don't want any of this stuff. And in his own terms, that's what he did. He had more things than most people have, but it was still a tiny bit of what he normally brought. So that off we started going, and then the next thing that happened was Brad Pitt turned up in London, and he wanted to talk, have a meeting about it, because he was really excited about it. And he wanted to play the part that Bruce was playing. And oops, that's not what I'm meeting you about. And we talked a lot because the idea of him playing Jeffrey Goins was so far out of what he had done before, because he had been cool, he'd been laconic, he'd been beautiful. And here was this really fucked up guy who was a motor mouth. And Brad had never done motor mouthing before. Half of what I do is to scare myself to see if we could pull it off. And it worked. And what was the interesting thing about it was that in the course of this, Brad, we could walk around the streets together, we'd go to places, restaurants, and talk, no problem. And then Legends of the Fall came out, just as we were about to shoot. And suddenly Brad had been catapulted up into that superstar status, which makes him impossible to move. We had to get security, girls were going to throw themselves out of windows, it was just madness. And off we went, and we went to Philadelphia, and we shot, and it was hard, but I really love that film because the script is all there. We didn't bugger it up, and both Brad and Bruce just were amazing. But the person that got me through the movie was Madeline Stowe, who doesn't get any credit because both Brad and Bruce were so surprising and good. She holds the thing together. She was the thing that held me together. She's just a great actress and a really smart lady who whatever was going on with the other two, I could always count on her to be just solid right through it. And that was great. And I mean, I was very, very pleased with it, very happy with the film. And then Hollywood comes back. Hollywood mentality comes back, because I have a meeting later about whatever I was going to do next. And I'm meeting with two big studio guys. And they say, I said, it was fantastic. They said, yeah, it was absolutely great, wonderful, congratulations. And I said, but the fact that it worked is a big surprise. I said, what are you talking about? I said, what are you talking about? He said, simple, 2 words. I said, 2 words. Yeah, Brad Pitt. I said, come on, just stop this. This is nonsense. Their ability to reduce things. No, it's a complicated story, intelligent. It's 2 guys playing against type. It was many things, and it worked on that level.
J.K. Rowling wanted you for Harry Potter. You obviously didn't end up doing that, and you've spoken about your relief that you didn't do that. But I'm intrigued as to what your ideas were for it. Like, what would a Terry Gilliam Harry Potter have been like?
Well, I didn't have to do much, because on the way out to LA in the first-class cabin, as I was, because the studio was sending me out there to do what they call their due diligence, to show that show J.K. Rowling and David Heyman, the producer, that they were serious about considering Terry Gilliam, which of course they weren't. I wasn't going to get the job, there was no way. But flying out there reading the script, I said, oh, this is a piece of piss. This is easy. I know how to do this. She's obviously seen Time Bandits. She's seen Python, and she does what she does. This is the world I know. I am the right director for this job. There's no question. But you go out there, and what was so funny is that I knew I wasn't going to get it, but I have this session with the executives and all. And in the course of it, I get excited as I wave my hands and I said, and at this point the stairs could be moving this way, and I'm now doing the film, and I got myself excited, then I spent about 2 hours driving around afterwards, hitting myself. Why did I allow myself to get excited? Because I was not going to get the job. There was no way. They wanted a safe pair of hands when they're going to spend that money. But it was easy, because I understand that world. And to me, the only one that is worth going to see is the third one, which Alfonso Cuarón did, and he got it. It was dangerous, it was dark, it was spectacular. It had all the elements that are in the project. And I thought Alfonso's version was as good as I could have done. So I'm happy that at least got one out that was close enough to what I thought was possible with Harry Potter.
And so that sort of brings me on quite nicely to Johnny Depp, who is quite difficult to put into a box. What was he like as a collaborator on Fear and Loathing?
Johnny had completely, stolen Hunter's soul by that point. He had been living with Hunter. He's squirreling away Hunter's clothes. It was so method acting beyond anything anybody's ever done. And we just started shooting, and it was great. I mean, I think before we started shooting, the moment I really loved is, oh, Johnny, you're going to shave your head here. You're going to have to be a baldy. And he was wonderful, because he says I think it's 14 strands of hand, which he held on to, that would be there to cover it. And so the day we shave his head, he's sitting there, and I walk in, and he's looking in the mirror, sort of shocked. He said, what do you think? I said, John, you look like a fool. And we were off. Because Johnny had always wanted to be in Python, I think. He said if I'd been born earlier, I would have been. He's so funny, he's so fast, and so clever what he can do. And what was great about this one, he had Hunter as a solid block, a guide, that he wasn't inventing a character, he was Hunter. And then he played with it, and every day he would play in a different way. There was a real tension between Johnny and Benicio and myself, because Johnny was so much more fun. Benicio was harder work, but on screen he's extraordinary.
What was it like filming with Hunter S. Thompson on set for his cameo? Like, what kind of pressure was that? As an experience, what was that like?
Well, it was a thing we were all worried about Hunter coming on, but of course Hunter had to come on. The other thing I have to say is that the producer, Leila Nabulsi, was his ex-girlfriend. So it's family we're talking about now. And Hunter comes on the day, and that day we had Christina Ricci. It was the courtroom scene, and Harry Dean Stanton, another good friend of Hunter, and also Lyle Lovett that day. They were all buddies of Hunter, and they all came on the film because of Hunter. And there's Hunter, and I'm trying to get on with the work, and there's Hunter drawing attention to himself. He couldn't stop trying to be the center of attention, so he's throwing bread rolls at me while we were setting up the shots. And this went on and I just ignored it, just plodded on, doing it. And Hunter eventually gets a bit bored, and now it's the moment in the Matrix nightclub, the scene where he's going to be in the movie. We got 60 extras. We're running late. We're moving into overtime that day, and Hunter is now this recalcitrant sheep that we can't, us, the shepherds and the sheepdogs, can't get on the set. Lila's around him, Johnny's around him, I'm on it. And he's like, okay, I'm going to sit there. I was an observer. I wasn't in the middle of the scene. I was an observer. I wouldn't, why would you put the table there? Nothing wrong. And we're, no, Hunter, come on, we're begging and pleading. And it wasn't working. And then Layla was the smart one. She got the most beautiful extra she could find, the best looking gal, and set her at the table. And Hunter, thump, plump, plump, sat down quietly. Now we're setting, all these people are dancing. We've got this big long shot coming through. Johnny's got lines. It's all very tricky. And we come through there on the first take, and Hunter's supposed to say something. He completely ignores it. He's talking to the girl. We're into more overtime. This is getting worse and worse. We finally got, I think it was the second take, Hunter did do what he was supposed to do, and then lost it after that, and we got bored. So it was a nightmare. But listen, he wrote this book. He lived that life. He can do many things and be forgiven. It was the most frightening thing for Johnny and I was when we finished the film, a screening for Hunter. It turned out Hunter was as frightened of seeing the film and being disappointed as we were that he might be disappointed. And it took ages. Many screenings were set up, and something would, his mother was ill. He couldn't make it. Finally, at the end, somewhere in Aspen where he lived, in somebody's private cinema, he finally saw it. And Hunter always had somebody recording his life. He was a man of history. And then I've seen the tape of him rolling around on the floor laughing at the end of it. I thought, we did it. We were all happy. Mm-hmm. And that's probably pleased both Johnny and myself more than anything that Hunter liked the movie.
Mm-hmm. You don't often collaborate with people more than once. Jeff Bridges, Robin Williams, but...
well, I got Jeff into Tideland.
That's what I mean. Exactly, yeah.
Robin twice. Come on, let's be fair here.
No, that's what I mean. Those guys you worked with twice, but Heath was one of those.
Yeah, exactly.
What was special about him?
Everything was special about Heath. That's the extraordinary thing. Anybody who worked with Heath or met him along the way knew this is the one, the chosen one. He really felt that with Heath. There was, an incredible, the talent was, we only saw the tip of the iceberg, let's be honest about that. He was completely honest and fearless. There was no skin around him. It was extraordinary. We all felt, when we were doing Brothers Grimm, he was like 24, I think, 26, I thought he was older than Matt Damon. Matt was in his mid-30s. We all thought, who is this kid? I was shocked by how young he was, how wise he was, and what an old soul he was, all in there. Now, he was, it was great. By the time we came to do Parnassus, I was just letting him run. And he was just taking us. He was the kind of person who would take you down roads that, I didn't think about that. Where are we going now? Everybody who worked with him just was in love with him. He lifted everybody up. And I finally thought, I found my Mastrioni, my alter ego for film. And then when he died on Parnassus, it was something, it was unbelievable. It was almost unbearable for all of us. Now it's weird when you bump into a Johnny or there are people that are just wonderful. Heath had it all and a little bit more. It's a very strange thing to be that close to somebody that you do think is a genius, and then they're gone.
I think there's a misconception that Heath was in quite a dark place when he was making The Dark Knight. Yeah, exactly. You were prepping Parnassus with him when he was on the set of that film. Can you tell us a little bit about the stories that he told you about making that movie? Well,
he would come back from shooting when he was here in London, and he was giggling the whole time. He couldn't believe what he got away with, is what it was about. He said, this is extraordinary. ignored me. They can't touch me. Because I'm the Joker. And in scenes where he's supposed to be being, tortured or whatever, he said, they can't get at me. He said Aaron Eckhart was going crazy because Aaron couldn't match him. He tried to go there and be nastier. He said, no, you can't get me. I'm just the Joker. I'm free and loose. And I've never seen somebody come back from a day's shooting more giggly that this was fun. It wasn't, and that's what's so weird. They thought it was a dark place. No, as the Joker, you've got power over everybody. So he realized in those interrogation scenes, they couldn't do a thing to me. I was free. And the ideas of some of the stuff, he just loved it. It kind of, in a strange way, it felt like Johnny on Fear and Loathing. So you got a really solid base you're working with, and now you just explode. But no, the way the press, see again, it's stories, and they try to stick you into a story. And the story is the tortured guy, he's on drugs, he's all this, and that's how he died. It's not that at all. I'm not going to tell you the real story, but the real story is just, there were things going on that were making him just wearing him out more than anything on Parnassus. He would come at work in the morning having to deal with what was going on with lawyers and all sorts of shit. And he'd come in the morning just exhausted. And by the end of the day, he was just like this again. Because the work was what it was about, and he was so good. He was utterly generous to everybody. I mean, Lily Cole was suddenly, she's stuck in there with these really great actors with very little experience, and he brought it out of her. There are scenes with Christoph where he's ad-libbing, because he had never really ad-libbed before, and I just gave him room because I knew he was in there. Scene where towards the end, where he's as Tony trying to get back into the mirror, and he's just relax, chocolate melting over your head. This wasn't in the script. It was Heath just flying. Now, what's interesting about it, when I look at Heath in Parnassus, he looks like a guy who's 35, 36 years old. He was 26 years old, 27 he was. I mean, he was like 10 years older. He looked it and behaved than he really was. It was quite extraordinary. But no, it's one of the great losses. It's sad because like Philip Seymour Hoffman is another one. But these Phil had a few more years. He had another 20 years on Heath. Heath would have been whatever. I mean, Brando wouldn't have been close to him, I think, by the end of it,
Another Brothers Grimm collaborator appears in Zero Theorem, which is a wonderful movie, by the way. I loved it. I found it very moving, actually.
Oh, that's great, because that's what it should do to people. I mean, it's sad. It's a sad movie about where we are now or not. I mean, a man who wants to escape from the connectivity, the noise of the world, and to find out what life is really about, and then in a sense, humanity comes to him, and he becomes more humane, he becomes more vulnerable, and even then he can't control it. He can't, when the moment of choice is, do you go with the girl who you've been fantasizing about or living in a virtual world with, and the reality comes, he can't grasp reality, he can't hold on to it, and he ends up in another place, which I fear for many people is the future. Maybe the virtual world is a safer world. Maybe it's as fulfilling as the real world. The real world is a much more complicated place. And so Cohen is in many ways a tragic figure. He's certainly a sad figure. I wanted to leave him with some dignity and a moment of control. He can control the setting of the sun. And Matt, here's what was wonderful about Matt. And Matt, I do think, is one of the great actors. The sad thing is, with Behind the Candelabra, Michael's getting all the prize. Matt is extraordinary in that movie. It's an amazing performance. And Matt, again, is another really good human being out there in the business. I'm lucky to meet these people and work with them. And when it came to Zero Theorem, I called Matt up and said, got a part for you. It's 4 or 5 days work. I'll send you the script. He says, don't bother, I'm there. That's the kind of wonderful thing that you get from people where you've worked together and you've spent time, become friends, and it's nice they're there when you need them, because we didn't have the money on Zero Theorem. We just everybody came in, whether it's David Thewlis, Tilda Swinton, Ben Whishaw, Sanjeev Bhaskar, Peter Stormare. They came in, they were working for nothing, basically scale. And they came in and helped us make the film. And those are the moments in the end when you think it's really been worth it. You've been lucky to meet these great people and become friends, and they're there when you don't have the money to make the movie you set out to make.
And I'm going to end this on an easy question. What is the meaning of life, Terry Gilliam?
Well, thank you very much for that. I have no idea. The meaning of life should be completely different for each person. You've got to make your life meaningful, nothing more than that. Life itself is a process of cells dividing, atoms connecting with other atoms. That's what it is. The fact that it's produced what we have around us is still the great mystery. I don't care how many genomes we decipher, how many the things we can do. Life itself is just a great mystery, and the point is don't have anybody else tell you what the meaning of your life is. You've got to do it. Make it real. Make it what it is. And it's up and down. It's not that simple little story that they keep telling you in the movies. It goes bing, bang, bong. It's a messy process. But the meaning for me is to keep control of what I do, to make my own mistakes, to luckily work with people that excite you and become friends that stimulate you, make your life a misery maybe, but that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
The sun sets slowly.
Thank you so much for your time, Terry. Thank you.
Thanks.
We always wanted to feel a reason for being, the meaning of our life.
We're connected. We can be together for real.